Do you trust your own mind? We usually believe that sadness is just an emotion, a temporary reaction to a bad day or a difficult moment. But true depression is not just being sad, it is a hostile takeover of your biology. It is a biological short circuit where the very organ designed to keep you alive decides to turn off the lights, lock the doors, and convince you that the outside world is no longer worth exploring. Today, we are going to dismantle the human brain and explore every single type of depression. We will uncover how they feel, what exactly breaks inside your neural pathways, and how modern science is finding ways to turn those lights back on. Adjust your certainties and prepare yourself, because by the end of this video, you will realize that depression has many faces, and it is highly likely that you will recognize one of them. Major depressive disorder. The heavy blanket. Let us start with the most known, but often most misunderstood. Major depressive disorder. This is what most people picture when they hear clinical depression, but it goes far beyond feeling down. It is a constant, crushing physical weight that invades everything. You wake up exhausted even after sleeping for 12 hours. The things that used to give you a rush of excitement or joy now feel completely hollow. Inside your brain, a terrifying shift of power is happening. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational CEO of your brain responsible for planning, focus, and decision-making, starts working at a fraction of its normal capacity. It essentially powers down. Meanwhile, your amygdala, the brain's primitive fear and alarm center, becomes hyperactive and gets stuck in overdrive. This biological imbalance makes minor daily inconveniences feel like insurmountable, life-threatening mountains. Your brain is trapped in a negative loop, convinced the danger and hopelessness are real. Fortunately, this altered state is treatable. SSRI medications help flood the brain with serotonin to restore balance, while cognitive therapies physically rewire the cortex to regain control over the panicked amygdala. Persistent depressive disorder, dysthymia. The invisible fog. But what happens when the storm doesn't hit you all at once, but rather settles in as a permanent, gray fog? Welcome to persistent depressive disorder, also known as dysthymia. Unlike the acute crash of major depression, dysthymia is a low-grade, chronic shadow that lasts for at least 2 years, and often much longer. People with this condition usually keep functioning. They go to work, they socialize, they force a smile. But internally, the reward system of their brain, driven by dopamine, is running on absolute fumes. Life feels entirely flat, food loses its taste, achievements lose their thrill, and joy feels like a fleeting illusion. Because this state is so prolonged, many people do not even realize they are depressed. They tragically assume that this is just their personality. They think, I am just a cynical or tired person. But they are not. Their brain's dopamine pathways are simply starved. Long-term therapy, low-dose medications, and structured routines can slowly reactivate these reward circuits, teaching the brain how to recognize and absorb pleasure once again. If this deep dive into the human mind is helping you understand yourself or someone you love, there is something very simple you can do right now. Leave a like on this video. It is not just a button, it is a signal and a vote of confidence so that these invisible battles can be brought into the light and reach those who need it. If you leave now, you will miss the most complex mechanisms of the brain. Let's continue. Postpartum depression. The biological earthquake. Now, let's talk about a biological earthquake. Postpartum depression is not simply the baby blues or being a little emotional after childbirth. It is a profound, intense, and terrifying condition that can completely alter how a mother feels about her environment, herself, and her own child. The biology behind this is violent. During pregnancy, a woman's body is flooded with massive levels of estrogen and progesterone. Within days after giving birth, these hormone levels crash back down to zero. This sudden freefall directly destabilizes the brain systems regulating serotonin and dopamine. Add extreme physical exhaustion and sleep deprivation to this chemical crash, and the result is a brain struggling to survive. Mothers may feel a deep void, intrusive, terrifying thoughts, and a devastating inability to bond with their baby, accompanied by crushing guilt. It is vital to understand, this is not a lack of love. It is a medical emergency, a temporary chemical failure that, with the right therapy, support groups, and safe medication, can be completely healed. Bipolar depression. The broken pendulum. If human emotions worked on a pendulum, bipolar depression is what happens when the pendulum swings with enough force to break the clock. This is not a standard emotional slump. It is one extreme half of bipolar disorder. During the depressive phase, the despair is agonizingly heavy, characterized by profound emptiness and total physical lethargy. But the cruel twist of this condition is that this crushing low alternates with episodes of mania or hypomania, periods of explosive, overflowing energy, racing thoughts, and dangerous impulsivity. The brain's mood-regulating regions, like the frontal cortex and limbic system, completely lose their grip on the steering wheel. Treating this type of depression requires absolute precision. Giving a standard antidepressant to someone with bipolar depression is like pouring gasoline on a fire. It can forcefully trigger a manic episode. Instead, psychiatry uses mood stabilizers, like lithium, to act as a biological anchor, keeping the brain's electrical storms from swinging too far in either direction. Seasonal affective disorder, said, the winter thief. Imagine your happiness being stolen by the weather. Seasonal affective disorder is a very real biological reaction to the changing of the seasons, typically hitting hardest during the dark, cold months of winter. As the sunlight disappears, your brain's internal chemistry is hijacked. The lack of ambient light triggers your brain to overproduce melatonin, the hormone that makes you sleepy, leaving you in a state of perpetual hibernation. Simultaneously, your serotonin levels plummet, stripping away your mood stability, your circadian rhythm. Your body's internal clock gets entirely thrown off balance. You crave heavy carbohydrates, and find it physically agonizing to get out of bed. The cure, fascinatingly, is light. Phototherapy, which involves sitting in front of a specialized bright light box for 30 minutes a day, essentially tricks the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus into believing it is summer, suppressing melatonin and thawing the frozen mood. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD, the monthly storm for some. The threat is not the changing seasons, but a monthly internal cycle. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder is essentially standard premenstrual syndrome amplified to a devastating, incapacitating extreme. About a week or two before a cycle, the brain undergoes a radical shift. This isn't just about feeling irritable, it involves severe mood swings, intense anger, spontaneous crying spells, and a terrifying feeling of losing emotional control. Biologically, this happens because the brain is hypersensitive to the completely normal fluctuations of hormones, particularly progesterone. This extreme sensitivity disrupts the serotonin network. Women suffering from PMDD are often misunderstood and dismissed as just being hormonal, but the neurochemical reality is exhausting. Treatments targeting the luteal phase of the cycle with specific SSRIs or hormonal stabilizers can act as a shield, preventing the brain's serotonin from collapsing every single month. Atypical depression. The ultimate paradox. The name atypical depression is actually a massive paradox because it is incredibly common. It is called atypical because it does not look like the classic picture of depression. People with this type can actually experience moments of genuine joy when something good happens. Their mood is reactive, but underneath that brief smile, the heavy anchor remains. Biologically, the limbic system is trapped on high alert. The most distinguishing features are a heavy, leaden feeling in the arms and legs, a tendency to sleep 10 or 12 hours a day, intense cravings for sugar and carbs, and a highly painful sensitivity to perceived rejection or criticism. Their dopamine and serotonin are deeply unbalanced, and the brain processes social interactions as potential threats. Because they can laugh at a joke, friends often think they are fine, making this one of the most silently isolating types of depression. Situational depression. The cortisol floods sometimes. The brain isn't broken, the world is. Situational depression, or adjustment disorder, is a direct, overwhelming biological reaction to a massive life blow, a brutal breakup, the loss of a loved one, a sudden job loss, or a drastic move. While grief is normal, situational depression occurs when the brain fails to adapt, and the sorrow overstays its welcome, paralyzing your daily life. Your body perceives the emotional trauma as a physical threat and opens the floodgates, drowning your system in cortisol, the primary stress hormone. When cortisol levels remain sky-high for weeks on end, the brain's emotion regulation centers simply burn out. You aren't lacking willpower, your nervous system is literally saturated with stress chemicals. The good news is that this type is highly treatable. As the person processes the change through therapy and time, the cortisol levels drop, and the brain's equilibrium naturally restores itself. Psychotic depression, the nightmare reality. We now enter the darkest and most misunderstood territory of the human mind. Psychotic depression. This occurs when a severe depressive episode becomes so intensely heavy that the brain actually loses its grip on shared reality. The depression merges with symptoms of psychosis. The suffering individual might begin to hear voices telling them they are worthless, see things that aren't there, or develop intense, paranoid delusions usually centered around themes of guilt, physical illness, or impending doom. Biologically, the dopamine system, which heavily influences our perception of reality, becomes radically dysregulated alongside the profound drop in serotonin. Because the symptoms are so terrifying, many hide them out of shame. However, it is highly treatable. A combination of antidepressants and antipsychotics, or highly effective treatments like electroconvulsive therapy, can successfully reboot the brain, pulling the person out of the nightmare and back into reality. Treatment-resistant depression. The stubborn wall finally. What happens when you have tried absolutely everything? Treatment-resistant depression is the stubborn wall that refuses to break. You have tried 3 different medications, years of therapy, lifestyle changes, and the darkness still refuses to lift. For the patient, it feels like a permanent life sentence. But neurologically, it is an issue of neuroplasticity and connectivity. The brain's mood circuits are effectively locked or severely degraded. Standard medications just bounce off, but science has unlocked new doors. Breakthrough treatments are literally rewiring the brain. Ketamine infusions can rapidly generate new neural connections in a matter of hours, bypassing the broken serotonin system entirely. Transcranial magnetic stimulation uses magnetic pulses to physically wake up dormant areas of the prefrontal cortex. The darkness may be stubborn, but it is not invincible. It just requires a different key. Depression is not a character flaw, a weakness, or a choice. It is a highly complex, biological condition with many different masks. But no matter which mask it wears, it leaves clues, and more importantly, it has treatments. You are not broken beyond repair. Your brain simply needs the right map to find its way out of the woods. We have reached ground zero of the human mind. Now, I want you to be completely honest. Which of these types of depression surprised you the most, or which one have you recognized in yourself or a loved one? Leave your answer down in the comments, because I want to read how many of you can identify the hidden architecture of the mind. Now, apply your superpower of curiosity and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next mental dismantling.